Welcome to the Universal Spirit Sakimori Research Lab. Thank you very much for your visit. In the previous 12th session, we discussed the gold, silver, copper, iron, and dark ages that we have gone through from the Atlantis era to the present day. We also verified that both Rudolf Steiner and Onisaburo Deguchi have almost the same view. Furthermore, we understood that after the Atlantis era, the human soul gradually lost its recognition of the higher spiritual world and was in the stage of developing the ego in the material dimension. We also discussed why Jesus Christ had to be born on earth 2,000 years ago for this reason. This time, we would like to examine the spiritual problems that arose because humanity was immersed in the material world during the Dark Age Kali-yuga. Steiner wrote in his autobiography that the 3 years from 1897 to 1900 were a period when he overcame extremely concentrated spiritual trials. Note, the content in parentheses is for supplementary explanation. The bud finally grew strongly at the turn of the century, the transition from the 19th to the 20th century. What happened before this turn of the century was the trial of the heart mentioned earlier by the fallen angel Ahriman, who traps humans in materialism. Facing the mystery of Golgotha in the midst of the most internal and most serious festival of recognition had significant meaning for the growth of my heart. In this way, even in the individual Steiner, at the same time as the end of the Dark Age Kali-yuga, he overcame the trials, entered the mysteries, and reached a deep understanding of Christ. Steiner also says in his lecture, "We are living in a very important transitional period. What is important is that we are living in an age when the Dark Age is ending. The age when humans gradually and slowly develop new abilities is now beginning. The age when the human soul gradually becomes different is beginning. However, many people are not aware of it. There is no need to be surprised at that. Even at the beginning of the Christian era, many people were not aware of the Christ event. Kali-yuga ended in 1899. Now, we are living in a new era. What begins here slowly prepares new soul abilities for humans. What I would like to focus on here is the end of Kali-yuga in 1899 and Steiner's insight that the human soul will gradually enter a different era. 1899 is the year when Onisaburo Deguchi had his second reunion with now Deguchi and joined Omoto. It is also the time when Kunito Kotachi no Makoto shifted from Guardian of the Shadow to Guardian of the Sunrise. The Omoto divine message from that time states, Ashitora no Kanjin equals Kunito Kotachi no Makoto is the god who first created this world, but because his sense of justice was too strong, he was pushed into the northeast direction for 3,050 years, so he has been helping humanity from the shadows, but guarding from the shadows is not enough, and the divine virtue is not understood by people at all, so he appeared on the surface, emitting the light of divine power, and began to save the world. It's a big project. And in 1900, when Onisaburo Deguchi was 29 years old, he was engaged in the following activities. 1898, first visit to Ayabe City, established a spiritual association, organized the Kinmei Spiritual Society. 1899, visited Omoto in Ayabe City. New Year's Day 1900, married Yumiko Deguchi, the youngest daughter of now Deguchi. July 4, 1900, unsealed Kutsu Island Shoes Island. August 2, 1900, unsealed Kanmuri Island Crowned Island. October 1900, after visiting Mte Karama, now Deguchi secluded herself in the mountain for about 100 days of training. April 26, 1901, performed the water mission at Motoai's Shinto Shrine. May 27, 1901, poured the water of Motoai's Shinto Shrine into the sea between Kutsu Island Shoes Island and Kanmuri Island Crowned Island. July 1, 1901, performed the fire mission at Izumo Shrine, received the sacred flame and soil, lit the sacred flame in front of the gods and spread the soil in the palace in Ayabe. 1901, the Battle of Fire and Water, the great debate between Amaterasu Mikami and Susanoo no Makoto. The mission of this time's Motoi's Shinto shrine is a programming mission to unify the world. If you go to Izumo once more, the mission of Izumo will be completed, and heaven, earth, and the world will all be made flat. If this mission is not completed, you will not be able to understand the meaning of the mission of this great project. However, once you understand, it will be fast. The purification of all the souls in the world is done by the guardianship of water and fire. In this way, the year 1900 AD is also the year when Onisaburo Deguchi married Sumiko Deguchi, the divine work of Emoto began, and the curtain of the 3,000-year structure was cut and dropped. When you think about it, the words of the Owamoto divine message in January of the old calendar in 1893. The plum blossoms that open at once in the 3,000 worlds. It has become the world of Ushitora no Kanjin. Open with plums, rule with pines, it has become the world of the kingdom of God, can be considered to declare the end of Kali-yuga and the arrival of the age of sunrise. Furthermore, in the Owamoto divine message of 1915, it is written as follows for the guardian deity. When the time comes, if the three great gods do not help, God's project will be delayed. Because this cannot be understood by the guardian deity or the people, everyone must polish their spirits beautifully together, otherwise, even if something wonderful is happening in front of them, they cannot see it. Even if Kunito Kotachi no Makoto makes now Deguchi write the actual thing and makes her read it, no one would pay attention to it. Therefore, because the direct guidance of the three great gods of heaven will become stricter from now on, if the guardian deities of Japan do not change their hearts and cannot return the spirit of the Japanese people to the original Yamato soul, God will decide the rules so that he cannot live in Japan. Therefore, the divine law this time will be stricter than the ancient divine law. In this way, if you do not polish your spirit beautifully now, not only humans but also guardian deities without a physical body will struggle later on. On the other hand, Steiner looks back at the time in his autobiography and writes as follows. The conviction that the turn of the century would undoubtedly bring a new spiritual light to humanity crossed my mind at the time. It seemed to me that the momentum to separate human thought and will from the spirit had reached its peak. It seemed inevitable that drastic changes would appear in the process of human development. From this, it can be understood that the end of Kali-yuga is when the philosophy of materialism reached its peak, a powerful light in a spiritual sense was shed on humanity, and it was a premonition of the arrival of the dawn of the spiritual age. This means shining the light of spiritual wisdom to recognize the real existence of spirits and the spiritual world into the darkness of materialism. Also, by doing so, it can be said that it means the arrival of a new era where immoral acts that have been tacitly accepted until now are exposed and gradually corrected. Meanwhile, in a lecture on January 25, 1910, about the end of the previous Kali-yuga, Steiner also said the following. However, it is quite possible that people today cannot grasp this most important event for mankind. It is much easier now than before. Because it is still a dull experience like a shadow, people may not be able to grasp that it is an insight into the real spiritual world. For example, dangerous materialism could spread on Earth, and many people may show little understanding. And it is possible that people with clairvoyance could be considered foolish and be put in a mental hospital. Once, John the Baptist, as a precursor to Christ himself issued a cry, "A new era has come." The human heart and soul must advance to the kingdoms of heaven. That cry is still echoing today, but it is possible that this new era will pass by humans and leave no trace. In fact, around the time of this lecture by Steiner, now Deguchi, who was living in the mold of John the Baptist in the spiritual world story, was continuously shouting about the end of the Muddy Sea era and the opening of the world of God through the Owamoto divine message. The Owamoto divine message is written as follows. When the rock doors of heaven and earth open, the world will have to repent all at once. Therefore, we are advising how necessary it is to repent until that happens and polish the true Yamato soul. However, because it is said by an uneducated person like now Deguchi who lives at the bottom of society, it may not reach the ears of people in today's academic society. God's programming, which cannot be seen with the naked eye or heard with the ears, cannot be understood by people's wisdom, academic ability, or thought. People of the world who do not know the mechanism of the divine world may doubt it with various reasons, but this time's great work is something that cannot be known by people's power. Looking at this, it is clear how much materialism had taken hold in society at the time, as people in Japan did not believe in spiritual clairvoyance at all. This can also be said about the present day. The divine possession of now Deguchi, the founder, is said to have started in 1892. Therefore, 7 years before the end of Kali-yuga, Ushitora no Kanjin, also known as Kunito Kotachi no Makoto, had already repeatedly emphasized to people the importance of polishing their spirits and the appearance of God. Steiner said, "It is possible that people with clairvoyance could be considered foolish and be put in a mental hospital." And indeed, now Deguchi, the founder, was misunderstood by the police and even his daughter and son-in-law for his words and actions at the time. In 1893, he was suspected of being an arsonist, confined to a room for 40 days, and had to endure harsh days. Among mystics, it was said that the problems of the era called the Dark Ages, Kali-yuga, and the Age of Mud have had a serious impact not only on the earth but also on the spiritual world. Steiner states as follows. Since the 16th century, what has become necessary for the evolution of the earth, that is, through the victory of science, something meaningful for the invisible world has entered into the whole evolution of mankind. With the victory of science, materialistic and agnostic feelings appeared more intensively than ever before. Materialism existed before, but the intensity of materialism that became dominant since the 16th century was unprecedented. When man entered the world of the divine spirit at the door of death, he brought with him into the spirit world the results of his earthly materialistic philosophy. Since the 16th century, the seeds of materialism on earth have been carried into the spiritual world. These seeds have grown. Christ came among the ancient Hebrew race and died there. And since then, the angelic existence that became the external form of Christ experienced the extinction of consciousness in the course of the 19th century. It is the result of the materialistic forces that have risen to the spiritual world. It is the result of the souls of materialistic humans who have passed through the door of death. And 6 years after this lecture by Steiner in London, a very noteworthy content was recorded by the spiritual communication of a completely different person in the UK. Let's first take up a part of that content. After being asked to participate in a major project, the first thing I worked on was the purification activity of the lower level. In ancient times, the 3 layers of the lower level were closely related to the earth and were also guiding. The opposite can also be said. That is, it is a fact that the lower world has taken in the influence of the earth. This is natural. Because the residents there were immigrants from the earth, and the closer the world was to the earth, the more direct influence it received. The flow of human development at that time was going downstream, outward, and to the material world. That was God's will. That is, God intended to manifest himself finally in the material form. However, because that direction went downward, the momentum accelerated, and the erroneous elements invading from the earth became so strong that they overshadowed the spiritual elements that accepted and transformed them. Therefore, in order for us to descend to the earth, it was necessary to purify the lower world. We did that as a preparation to further strengthen our work on the earth. This content was written by George Vale Owen, a clergyman of the Church of England and one of the most famous spiritualists of the early 20th century. This time, I will omit the details about him, but this communication is a message from the spiritual world that was written by his inspiration over about 5.5 years from September 23, 1913, to April 3, 1919. In Japan, it is distributed as Life Beyond the Veil, all 4 volumes, and is famous as a masterpiece that delicately and vividly describes the state of the world after death. This content is from a higher spirit, and in the spiritual world, the concept of spacetime is completely different from that on Earth, so naturally, the written date and the time when the event occurred do not exactly match. However, it is certain that the higher spirits have conveyed to Owen that this content was important during this period. From his book, it is understood that spiritual pollution occurred due to the spread of materialism brought into the spiritual layer close to the consciousness dimension on Earth, and this made the communication and protection between the higher spirits and humans on Earth more difficult. And it has caused a further vicious cycle. Therefore, in the spiritual world, it was an urgent task to spiritually purify the Earth. Also, it is believed that such spiritual pollution led to the extinction of angel consciousness in the 19th century, as Steiner had spoken. And for the relief from this crisis caused by spiritual pollution, it seems that the spirits of the higher layers were asked to participate in a major project. Also, that is the biggest reason why the higher spiritual wisdom was revealed one after another by multiple mystics and mediums around the world from the beginning of the 20th century. Furthermore, Steiner also states in his lecture, The Dark Ages, that the ancient prophets spoke of passed away in 1899. There is a spiritual world around us, and that spiritual world is trying to reveal itself. Perceiving this spiritual world and hearing its revelation is our task. That is what anthroposophy wants to point out to humanity. What anthroposophy proposes is not just a problem of mankind, but a problem of the entire universe. On the other hand, about the relationship between the spiritual world and the earth, Onisaburo Deguchi speaks in the spiritual world story as follows. Many wise people of today believe that there is no relation at all between natural disasters, strange phenomena, and human affairs. However, the deterioration of the spirit of the divine people on earth generates an evil atmosphere all over the earth, muddies the universe, corrupts the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, and changes the air, naturally leading to natural disasters and strange phenomena. All the changes in the universe are due to the deterioration of the heart of man, who is the microcosm of the universe, and the entire universe also deteriorates. It is the same as when the crown of a watch is damaged, and the entire watch stops functioning. Therefore, in the oracle of the great God, based on this principle, it is shown as follows: humans, who are made in the form of God, should, as soon as possible and as many as possible, reorganize and reconstruct their hearts to fulfill the role of God on earth and become the true heart of God. As Steiner, Owen, and Onisaburo Deguchi have written, it is not just a problem of mankind, but a problem of the entire universe and 3,000 worlds that surround the earth, the divine world, the ghost world, and the material world. And the great project of cleaning and washing the entire universe is the spread of anthroposophy and spiritualism, and the central activity was the soul reorganization and reconstruction by Ushitora no Kanjin's 3,000 years of God's programming, the baptism of fire by the words of Maitreya Bodhisattva, and the second coming of Christ to the etheric world. In the 13th episode, we deepened our understanding of the end of the Dark Ages of mankind, which lasted for over 5,000 years since 3100 BC, in 1899. Also, in Owamoto, we understood that the timing when Onisaburo Deguchi joined, the curtain of God's program of Ushitora no Kanjin equals Kunito Kotachi no Makoto was cut off, and it became the Age of Sunrise, coincided. Furthermore, we have been verifying that it is accompanied by a great project to purify the pollution of the spiritual world close to the dimension of the material world caused by materialism on Earth. In the next episode, we plan to further examine the relationship between this spiritual project and the second coming of Christ to the etheric world. Thank you very much for watching until the end. We appreciate your continued support.